Welcome back to the table, friends. I'm your humble host, Grady Ems, and with me, as always, is my co-host and co-conspirator, Owen.
Hello.
You're listening to Tabletop My Night, a bonus episode where we are going to explore a little activity, a little game that we got to play, and we wanted to share with you.
A little playtest.
Yeah, a little playtest packet that we wanted to bring you in the terms of, or in the spirit of spreading wonderful gaming throughout the world and trying to get people hooked on good games. So this is a bonus episode that is in response to us getting access to and playing a game of the playtest packet for the Matt Colville DM upcoming game system called Draw Steel.
Draw Steel.
So if you're big into RPGs and TTRPGs and stuff, you might have heard of Matt Colville. He's kind of a YouTube celebrity who, a little bit older gentleman, cut his teeth basically writing for a bunch of games. Most notably, when he talks about a lot, was he basically wrote a lot of the story elements of Evolve, the game where the hunters fight the monster. Also, huge fan of D&D and role-playing games, and he has basically launched kind of a new era of his career with YouTube videos and talks about gaming and running the game, and has become kind of a mainstay in that field. So one of the things that he did, he has opinions.
He has opinions.
Sometimes I agree, sometimes I don't, and that's the way the world should work. But he likes many things about modern role-playing games, and he dislikes some of them too. And he specifically has a tendency to lean towards a cinematic and kind of heroic fantasy style of storytelling that is his favorite. He likes games kind of like 4th edition D&D, where heroes kind of are these epic characters at the forefront of the story, and the storytelling can kind of take out or be played out in these kind of cinematic vignettes where heroes are heroes, villains are villains, and everybody is running around swinging from chandeliers and having a grand old time.
Always a chandelier.
So in that vein, a while ago, they launched a Kickstarter or a backer kit, I think, to basically pledge to support the game that they were developing, which used to be called the just Matt Colville DM game, but now officially has the title of Draw Steel.
Drawing steers? Draw steer.
Drawings.
Draw steer.
My name is Simon, and I do drawings. So we get to play the playtest packet, which comes with some pre-generated characters, information about making your character from level 1, and then 2 little scenarios, one of which we played, the other which is more ongoing that we didn't. And we're kind of going to talk about the rules and what we like and what we didn't like, and whether or not you should, take a look into this and maybe play it when you come out.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, this game is centered around cinematic high fantasy. So basically, if you took like Lord of the Rings, or give another good example, like
Tron.
It's Tron. I remember the pirate scene in Tron. Tron is very high fantasy.
Very high fantasy. Oh, like Aragon and
Legends. Yeah, Aragon. Yeah. So any kind of like, if you think of like the movie versions of role-playing games instead of like the 6-hour long drawn-out sessions, where basically you have the heroic moments, you have the spotlight, you're very thinking of that kind of mentality. That's what this is. I mean, it's very, like, in the explanation in the packet and stuff, they talk about, like, this is not a game where you're worried about encumbering weights and how long it takes you to go from point A to point B. Those games do exist. That's not this one. It's also not a game of, like, dungeon diving and, like, grim, dirty, like, politic backstabbing specifically.
It's a game about encounters.
Yes.
And encounters aren't always fighting.
Yeah. So, specifically what we did, we basically played through the playtest of Bay of Black Bottom, which is essentially an adventure where the characters are on a ship. The ship basically encounters a bunch of like weird problems, and then they get into a fight.
Yeah, we screwed it up really good.
Well, we were also down a man, so like, maybe the math wasn't exactly primed for the first first go ahead. So you can kind of walk through some of the discussion topics here. So at its core, which you always talk about pretty much every TTRPG, a game comes down to its central mechanic, and you can kind of pick the theme from there. And Draw Steel works on a 2d10 system.
And I like it.
So you roll 2 dice, 2 d10s, and you add them together, and that's your result. So that means that rather than rolling a d20, even though you have the values of 2 through 20, you're basically going to get a more bell curve-ish result.
You're much more likely to be in the average, in the middle.
Yeah, you're definitely not going to see the spike 1 in 20 as much as, you would normally. As a result, it's a little bit more predictable. It's a little bit more math assured. There are plenty of videos out there that you can watch where they talk about the decision to do this. And for a while, I believe it was 2d6.
Okay.
But they went up to 2d10 because that gave them a little more room to tweak things, which makes more sense. The other thing about it is that, so the target that you need to roll is always fixed.
Yeah, so you always know what it is.
Yeah, there's 3 different brackets. There is 11 or below, which is basically a tier 1 success, 12 to 16, which is a tier 2 success, and 17 or above, which is a tier 3 success. So basically, whatever you're doing, you know what number you need to roll against, and you don't have to worry about that back and forth with the DM over like, well, what's the target for this? And you have to look up difficulties and stuff. That doesn't mean everything's as simple as that. There are things that will modify your roll. So your number may change, but like, what you're trying to go against. And also, depending on the tier outcomes, they mean different things based on how difficult the roll is.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean a failure and doesn't necessarily mean a success either.
So like a bunch of different games, there's like success with a consequence, failure with a consequence. There's also like basically whether or not tier 1 is the thing actually happens or not. Depends on whether you're doing a skill or attack. So there's a lot of nuance here. But like you said, 2d10, you like this.
I do. I don't have a problem with rolling a d20, but I feel better rolling 2d10. I like rolling more dice.
Yeah. It was very interesting because originally I think I had a problem with the concept of rolling 2 dice and adding it up. And then when we were getting ready to play this, I was more like, okay, I'm open-minded. Let's play this. Let's have fun. Rolling 2 dice, I think the math, I'm behind. I think all that stuff is true. All that stuff makes sense. It's a pretty good experience to do it. The thing I just didn't like was it was like an extra step of math for me. I know that sounds really dumb, but like I work with math all the time, but just having like seeing like a 7 and a 6 on the dice was like, my brain was just like, I really have to spend that extra unit of measurement.
Yeah, we did do that a couple of times.
And I was like, really? I got to take that extra just weird half-second neuron firing to be like, wait a second, this is 14 minus 1's 13. So that was like the only like part of it that I was like, eh. But I do like, I know Critical Role's game has this whole weird like rolling with hope, rolling with whatever mechanic where you roll 2d12 and like you have to pick which one you're rolling. And I think that there's probably multiple ways people could succeed at this, but this is simple and I like it. And it's just like, it's in the vein of, you roll 3d6 and add it up. Well, you just roll 2d10.
Yeah.
And that's pretty simple, straightforward. And one of the coolest things that they did recently, they announced that they're going to have another little backer kit thing. Where they've hooked up with Chessex and they're making like old school D20s that are just 1 through 10 twice.
Okay.
So you get the feeling of rolling a better die, but it's still rolling 2d10. So
a better die.
Well, it's a more spherical die.
It has more facets.
Yeah, it's more of a, but yeah, so I'm like, we'll get a couple of those and I'll be like happier with the way.
Yes. I mean, I can see it.
But yeah, and also like there weren't a lot. I mean, we had like one critical, which is rolling a 19 or a 20.
Yeah, and it was on something completely unimportant.
Yeah, so I mean, you're taking away the goofiness of D&D, where like, let's be honest, like there's this whole thing with D&D where like your character goes up to do something that they should do 99% of the time they should be able to do, and you just roll like a 4, and it's because you've rolled 18 4s the past year. You just can't get away from your crappy dice. And this is nudging away from that.
Yeah. The game was a lot less swing heavy.
Yeah.
So no matter what, you were always doing something. Like even if you didn't get the role you wanted, you were still doing something, which I thought was neat. I like that. I don't think it necessarily works in every situation, but I do like that. It never feels like a role is wasted.
Yeah, I agree. So that brings us to another kind of flavor of these mechanics, is that if you go, so like strip away all the stuff we're going to talk about in a little bit, but let's go back to the basic concept of a person hitting another person.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to roll 2 dice, and then you're going to add your characteristic to it, and you're going to consult that table again. But even in the most basic version of that roll, you're still going to do damage to the person.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a weird, this is going to be a point of contention that they kind of set out to tackle from the beginning because people all had opinions on this.
Yeah, I have an opinion on this.
Yeah. Think a lot. So there's 2 parts to this. There's the tiers of success, and then there's the whether or not like you should always hit and do damage.
Yeah.
So the reason that they did this, at least give them the benefit of the doubt, was that they said it felt bad if you were sitting at the table, the goblin comes up, you roll to hit the goblin, and you do nothing. And they wanted to prevent that specific outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is not to say that you always succeed on a skill check, because those can just straight up fail. But this is if you're swinging your sword to hit the goblin, you always hit the goblin. If the goblin is swinging their sword to hit you, they always hit you.
Yes.
So what
were my thoughts on this?
Yes.
I actually didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
So we ran into a situation where my character, no matter what, I knew if he took another hit, he was going to be down. And I realized that I literally had no choice in the matter. So in D&D, if I was in the same situation where I'm just like, uh-oh, big bad's going to hit me, I always have in the back of my head, well, there's a chance he might not hit me. Mm. So if I can do the Hail Mary, if I take the chance and I do the Hail Mary that might save us, or take this guy down or whatever, I know I would rather take that than take the safe route or whatever. You know, I'd rather take the dangerous chance to do something, because if it succeeds, it's that, oh, yeah, awesome, I just did that. In this game, I knew no matter what I did, I was going down. And it wasn't because of any choice that I could make, because an action would have caused me to go down. Yeah. Moving would have caused me to go down. Doing nothing would have caused me to go down, because I knew that there was a guy around the corner that does exactly the amount of hit points that I had left, and there was no chance of him missing me.
Yeah, that base thing. And so, sure, we can give them the benefit of the doubt that your characters may get access to things that may negate damage down the road, and it'll be in your kit to do this. But like in its fundamental form, this is a thing that is true, right? Is like if you're just generic Joe Schmo and there's generic Joe Schmo bad guy, like your interaction with them is both of you are going to do damage to each other. And they even call this out as like, when they're explaining this, is just like, you're going to do damage to each other. The game is about who does more damage quickly.
Right.
It's not about getting away from damage.
Right.
So this is, yeah, it's a thing. It is the philosophy of this game. It's at the core of it. And I think they probably, like I said, designed accommodating it. So there's probably a lot of stuff that we haven't seen that will help deal with this stuff. But yeah, multiple people at our table brought this up. That like,
I agree.
The classic situation, like, you know, you having the chance to get out of something, having the chance that everything might go in your way was almost being taken away from you. But there was the mechanic of like, if you went down, you could still act but at your peril.
Yes, you could act at your peril. And I think the reason I didn't like it here is because we're level 1 characters.
Yeah.
And I was playing a mage who the peril was greater for me because I had so few hit points to begin with. So no matter what, acting at my peril had a 90% chance of killing.
Yeah, that was pretty brutal. But another character who just basically, because of the way they pre-built the thing, as soon as he went down, he just basically was suicidal.
Yes, there was nothing anyone could do.
That choice was taken away. So to be clear, we did not make characters for this. So these options probably could have been circumvented if we made characters. However, one of the things that we're talking about, which we haven't really explained, is that kind of like D&D, when your character falls, instead of health, it's stamina. When your character takes enough stamina to go down to 0 or in the negative, your character can keep taking damage, both from sources or by them doing things. So basically, almost anything they try to do,
aside from like just straight moving,
is going to basically do a D6, a random amount of stamina damage to them. It's basically representing that like you're hurt to the point where you are on death's door, and if you decide to exert what little like resources you have left to do something, you are basically risking like just bleeding out continuously.
Right.
I love that this is an option.
Yeah, I do like it. I think it's cool. I didn't like that once you hit that point, your personal resources to use to heal yourself were gone. Now, I realized that was a fault of the characters that we picked.
Yeah.
We made the situation harder by picking the 3 characters that had no auxiliary healing method.
Yeah.
We all picked DPS.
Yeah. So this was like thinking D&D terms, this was a level 1 campaign, and nobody had the healing. So when stuff went down, you just went down.
Which is, I mean, it was comical because once we were done, we're all just like, man, I mean, we just kind of went down like a ton of bricks, and you're just like, well, look at some of the abilities the 2 guys you guys didn't pick did. This guy lets you heal. This guy just looks at you and you heal. This guy can do something and then he makes a suggestion you can heal, and you can decide if you want to heal or not. And it's just like all this stuff. And we're like, yeah, we didn't have it. That would have made it a lot easier.
Yeah. So once again, I think that was just more our experience.
Yeah.
But I do love like I think that whether or not this needs to be fixed or whether it needs to be like massaged, I do love the idea that if you're on the ground kind of dying out and you're in this state where you're kind of safe unless someone decides they're going to run up and stab you. Like you're not like in the D&D thing where you're rolling to see if you're dying. But then there's this choice that is just on the table. And the choice is like, if I decide to push into the battle to do something because it has to be done, I am offered the choice to do it, but I might lose my character doing it.
Yeah.
That's super cool for me.
That is very cool. It just sucks when you're at -4 hit points. Your death is -8, and you have to roll a d6
yeah, like I know.
to see how many more hit points you're going to lose.
Feels bad, man. Feels really bad. Yeah, so cool mechanic. This did not feel cool the first time we played. So
I mean, I gave my life so that the Fury, is that what they were? So that the Fury could live, only to die seconds later when the ship blows up.
Yeah, so
that was fun. That was cinematic.
It's very cinematic. Yeah, I mean, at level 1 to have people streaming in on a ship and kind of like having people that you could basically kill in a turn, and then when you finally came to read your abilities and understand how it worked, and you're like, I could wipe out 2 of these people a turn. And this
like really, we needed to pay more attention to what our characters were capable of and understand it a little bit better. Because yes, we don't need to jump into it yet, but the synergy of the mage that they created was amazing. Yeah. Once I understood what it could do, it was great. Like we started out and I kicked 2 guys off the boat immediately. I'm just like, this would be great. I'm just going to keep kicking guys off the boat. And then I realized the way the essence worked and the way that his spells work and persistent spells and what I could do with those abilities. And I was just like, oh my God, if I had known this 2 turns earlier, we would have been done already. Mm-hmm. But it was still very cool. I really quite liked it. The way the abilities work, the trigger actions. I really like trigger actions because those they're like bonus actions in D&D, but they can be triggered off of very specific circumstances that, depending upon what it is, an ally might do it, an enemy might do it. You can do these optional things at no well, I don't know. I haven't seen all of them, but the ones I've dealt with had no resource cost. They just triggered. And that was badass. Like, I thought that was really cool how that worked.
Yeah. So if you're used to the way if you're used to a 5th edition, this is kind of like basically at level 1 stepping out with a 5th level character.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you had a sheet of abilities at level 1.
And they made sense and they did cool things.
Yeah. And they're all kind of thematically themed together. The one of the senses I get from this reading through the material is that basically you can have systems that do one of two things, right? You have systems where you build a character and like you have this really wide range of abilities that you can put on them, and you can customize a character to your liking. But one of the things you lack is you lack a deep, rewarding system to play with.
Mm-hmm.
This system is more like on the other side, where they're going to give you some of these archetypes that have deep synergistic like abilities, but you're going to be a little bit narrowed into like what they say,
specialty.
This is your archetype. Like
Yes,
this is
yes.
an archetype of a character you're playing, and you've made that choice already. So you're not going to like play a counter type mage,
Right.
even if you can kind of do that a little bit. What you're doing is you're like, I wanted to play a mage archetype,
Right.
so I'm going to like play this. And then you're rewarded with it by like, here's a bunch of systems that interact with each other and you can play with. That was really cool. Like I'm really kind of jealous that like, cause I want to play,
Yeah.
like I want to grab a character. I want to get into the, and I'm sure we will in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like I totally can see us playing this. Like I'm just slightly burned out on D&D.
Yeah.
And this is close enough to get that itch, but it's different enough that I don't feel that burnout.
Yeah. And just like the nature of this kind of fills D&D's area where the party really feels like you're working to overcome a problem together.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they're like, we're not saying the game's not social. There's not like social stuff that we didn't even get into.
No, we literally just ran into an encounter.
Yeah. But what we're saying too is that the combat and the rule systems, it felt like, oh, I want these options and I want to play them and I want to mess with other people. Like what really the class that's really calling out to me is the tactician.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing more than I want to be swinging my sword away at people and then like moving my friends and giving them healing bonuses.
And that's the other thing I really enjoyed about this was, so there's no initiative. There's just which side goes first. That was really cool. Like at first I was like, I don't know if I like that. But then there's no structure past that.
Yeah.
It's bad guys go first. So which bad guy goes first? Oh, I don't know. I'll pick this one. And then, okay, good guys go next. Well, which good guy goes next? Oh, well, if I do this, that kind of sets you up for this. So I'll go first this time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stay like that. After the round's over with, it goes back to the beginning and you guys pick again. So there were times where, hey, that's a cool ability you've got. I can jump off that with this. And then we can do X. And that was really cool. And then we found out one guy in our party can jump ahead as soon as one of us goes. So it's like, oh, sweet. So if I do this and set you up for this, this whole cascade of things happen. And that was really fun.
Yeah. There's more,
until it happens back to us.
Yeah. So there's more of a focus on the party kind of coming together and executing a plan when they know they're rolling it.
Yeah.
And which is really beautiful. And the counterpoint to that is that there's a system, not to mention just like, oh, well, if you manage to get all the hero actions in before, then like you're like 4 villains go at the end,
right?
Which sucks. But like there's also there's a mechanic called villainy points, where basically just as cinematic as the heroes doing all these things, over through the play of the module and the various things that didn't exactly affect
how
us.
bad did you screw up that social?
Yeah, like so there's there's a sense of like this back and forth kind of like fate, and if you give the storyteller, or I can't remember what they call him, the director, I think.
Yeah.
If you give them like, if you fail on rolls and do these things, they build up like villainy points, which then go into making some of the villains get to do broken and cool
Absolutely
things.
Broken.
And because it's a resource, the players and the storyteller know that this can't be done all the time.
Right. But when like, it does happen, your jaw hits the floor.
Yeah, like just stuff where you're like, oh, instead of my swashbuckler hitting you once, he's going to hit you, dance, and hit 3 other people in this blend of blades.
Basically
like,
moving across the entire ship while he's doing it.
And so cinematically, it gives you a chance to like be like, now you're really concerned about this guy, and it's not just a profile. And like, oh my god, and the villainy point, like it's our fault because we failed to roll.
Screwed up.
Like that's so cool. That was we didn't get to use it that much, but like that was a mechanic that I was very much wanting on my tool list. Like,
well, that's like our success with consequences.
Yeah.
Like that's really what that boils down to. And I have always liked that. I've always thought that's great, where you can decide like, hey, you need to do this thing. Like you need to get through this locked door, and all you have is a screwdriver. Are you going to try to pick the lock with the screwdriver? And yep, I'm going to do it. You roll it. Well, you didn't do very good. You can basically force the lock if you want to, but it's probably going to make a lot of noise.
Yeah.
Like that sort of thing. And it's like, do you want to do that? And it's like, yeah, I kind of want to do that.
Yeah, I really, so the first time I think we were ever interested in this kind of genre of mechanic was when we played the Star Wars game.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas that concept where you like had and of course, like, I think the players were like, well, we're just not going to use the resources.
Yeah.
Whoever gets it. But like, there's this back and forth with the light side, dark side thing. And I think all these games that are coming out now are like basically playing with their own version of this concept of back and forth. And that really kind of is born from people understanding like story tension and like the flow of action scenes and stuff. And like when it works, it's
great.
Yeah, it's a really great thing to do. So really cool that they did that too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I got some feedback from some of other players, so I'm just trying to figure out. Oh, so one of the things that we kind of glossed over is even though damage is assured, the amount of damage isn't.
Correct.
So like depending on which tier you roll, your abilities will just tell you how much damage you do.
Mm-hmm.
So like when you do roll better, you do more damage.
And it might add an effect as well. I had an ability that was a small AoE. If I rolled tier 1, it just did a small amount of damage. If I rolled tier 2, it did slightly more damage, but it also caused a slow effect for a turn. If I rolled the highest tier on it, it did more damage and caused to slow the enemy for the entire scene.
Yeah. It's kind of, and like that's what you're doing is you're pouring over your sheet looking for those special effects.
Yeah.
Oh man, if
does that fit here?
Yeah. Oh, what can I do if this pops off?
And a lot of moving. A lot of our abilities all caused enemies to move, like to be pushed and shoved. I noticed that. And I like that. I like being able to kind of affect the battlefield while you're going, kind of putting enemies in a better spot.
Yeah, and like even like I know we have a character sheet just here.
Mm-hmm.
One of their signature abilities basically is triggered when an enemy moves within 2 squares of them, and they can basically pull another enemy or move another. Like so, like saying that the game is dynamic can never be understated.
Yeah, I mean this is literally like playing a video game.
Yeah, I mean there's so much happening on the board, and like so one of the things that may be a drawback, and we'll eventually get to like kind of what the things that we didn't like about it is that like that you pretty much have to play this on a map.
Yeah,
like the mechanics are so specific precise about things like this that you can't engage accurately in like mind's eye theater kind of stuff.
But the thing that the opposite side of that coin that I think is fantastic is how many times have we played D&D and it's just like, oh, my turn's over? Okay. And then you stop paying attention until it gets back to your turn. Where this game, it's just like, no, I have to watch everything because I got these triggered actions and maneuvers that at any point in time I might be able to use it and fuck somebody's day up.
Or you just didn't know when you were going to go. Because you were just like, no, I think I'm going to wait for the other person to go. Oh, no, this thing's changed. Let me go now.
Yeah.
Because I can give you, and everybody was engaged almost all the time. Very awesome pro.
Until one of us got thrown in the water and turned into a vengeful spirit and started fucking shit up.
Yeah, there's one of the characters had an ability that basically only should exist in a playtest. I don't think it should exist in the main game, but it was cool. Maybe it was at higher level.
It was a background though. It wasn't even part of his character or his archetype. It was like just a background that they had given him.
And it played with, so the whole idea was that when the character went to 0 hit points, which triggered him, like we mentioned before, this idea that everything he did cost him health, so to speak, he lost control of his character and his character had to go fight.
Yeah.
And so it just meant that he died.
Yeah, because he had to go fight. He had to go attack the closest person to him, friend or foe. And just doing that was a detriment to his health because every time he'd use an ability, he'd have to roll to see if he would die more or not. And it's basically a guarantee. And not having anybody on the board that can just go, oh, let me heal you real quick and get you back above 0 hit points really just pretty much meant he was dead.
Yeah, you guys really needed the conduit.
Yeah.
Just really need to conduit. Okay. So let's see. What else did we need to cover?
We didn't get too much into like skills and things like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of this stuff may change. Do you have your character? Just saying if you want to maybe point out like something you're. So for example, like I'm sitting here looking at the tactician.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a trigger action parry, for example, which is basically a creature makes a weapon attack against the target. Basically, the effect is that you can have the target's damage, or if it like spends its resource, you can basically lower its damage threshold, and if it gets a crit, you can take another action.
Oh.
So like that's a thing that you sit on all the time.
Yeah.
And once again, the really great part of that ability is not necessarily what we just said. The design thing that's great is this is a thing the player can do at any point in time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they have to spend something for it. The cool thing is self or reach too. So it's if somebody else gets targeted too, they can do it. So they're going to be watching all the other players and all the other maneuvers around her, deciding if they want to spend this. And then in this thing that can do at any point in time, they also can spend one of their resources to make it better.
Yep.
So like the amount of thinking that has to be done just in this alone is going to keep them glued on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is like every round you're going to be like, when am I going to use this?
Yep.
Do I want to wait? Oh, the mage is getting cornered. Okay, well, that's the one I'm going to use it on, or, So like that design kind of philosophy is really great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I was playing as the Elementalist. They had their triggered action was Explosive Assistance, which was when the target is forced to move, I can choose to add my reason score to the number of squares that they move. So if somebody were to throw someone towards the edge of a boat, let's say, and they needed a little more distance, I could give them that distance and eject the person off of the boat if I so desired, which happened twice. And it was quite fun to do. And that's just a triggered action that I can do when a creature is forcefully moved.
So to give you an idea of like the breakdown, so for example, the tactician has a heroic ability called the Hammer and Anvil. And this is basically this is an action. So this basically consumes your action turn. So this is basically like a big hit.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, so 3 different tiers of what you could possibly roll on the dice, right? So if you roll the lowest, you do damage, which is pretty still good, 9 damage. And an ally within 10 can make a signature attack against the target as a free action. So we're talking about like this ability at its worst is still, I hit you and somebody else gets to do something.
Do whatever they want. Yep.
The ability at its best is a bunch of damage. 2 allies within 10 of you can both do their attacks, and they get bonuses as the attack as free triggered action, so they don't have to spend a triggered action. That's so cool.
That
right?
is cool.
Like when you pop off as this character, like you're just increasing the ability of your friends to have more fun, and because you know you did it, you feel really good about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, and this is level 1. Like this is thematically, I think they
really nailed it.
They really have a cool idea of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
The characters are complex. They're fun. The skills also, many of them can be used outside of combat.
Mm-hmm. So
each character class has a different type of heroic resource. Some of them seem kind of close. Others seem really different.
Yep.
Those skills can actually be used often outside of combat just to do things.
Mm-hmm.
I know the Shadow had a bunch of things that involved teleporting and like investigation.
Disappearing. Yep.
So those things were just things that the character had instead of this gamifying, like, oh, I can only use this ability in combat or it's tied to some resource. The other thing is almost all of the heroic resources that you use to bump up your abilities and stuff were set in a way that you kind of were going to either get them back.
Yes, they're replenishable.
Yeah, so this wasn't like you rest for 8 hours and blow your load.
Right.
So that mechanic is not in this game.
No.
Instead, they have a very interesting mechanic called victories.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what it amounts to is that as you guys are adventuring, to rest, you have to take 24 hours and essentially reset all of your momentum.
Mm-hmm.
That's when like everything gets reset. That's your full rest. When you're not doing that, when you're out heroically engaging in a battle and you're doing all these political maneuverings and all these other things, you're gaining victories. And victories essentially give you momentum and can be used to kind of gain a recovery and heal, or they can be used to like some of your abilities get more powerful no matter how many victories you have, because like you're amped up, you're ready to go. And it's this risk reward system because whenever you rest, the victories that you have remaining will get turned into experience
Yep.
to better your character. But you may want to use them to get through that battle.
Yeah.
Like,
You have to make the choice. Do I want to keep going at the risk of, maybe dying because I'm not as prepared anymore?
or just having to spend them on recovery.
Correct.
Like, and that was cool.
Mm-hmm.
That was, especially because it just took away the whole back and forth between a DM and a D&D group of like, are you guys going to stop for a short rest? And
Yeah.
I have to like create the impetus of the world to prevent you from resting.
Mm-hmm.
Here, the DM's just like,
Do you want to get
continue?
rid of the momentum
Yeah.
or do you want to continue?
Like, risk reward, man. Like,
Yep.
the guys in the castle, do you want to keep going? Like, and like some classes are built to take advantage of that more.
Mm-hmm.
So like the more victories, the more you'll start off with heroic resources, and you can basically go into combat more juiced and more ready to go. That was a really cool mechanic.
Yep.
I'm very interested in seeing play over campaigns and over a long
Right.
period of time.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, our short
So much, yeah.
fight to the death didn't allow us to reach those heights, actually having a victory point.
Fortunately, the ship blew up.
I like to say it conflagrated itself. Probably did not help that I am a fire elementalist, and there was a lot of fire going on.
Okay, so we've gushed about the game enough, and I do think this is very good, and I think that if you are a person or you're part of the group who likes to play a lot of TTRPGs, that you really need to watch this and decide whether or not you want to buy into it. At least, my opinion, just get the PDF, but when it comes out. But this is not perfect.
No, it's not.
So there are a few things. The 2D10 system, like I said, rolling 2 dice is great. The addition thing was
That's hard.
it was a little rough. The cool thing now is that like campaign of that he's going to sell the dice to.
Yeah.
They basically said like to play the game, all you need is basically 2 D10s and a D6.
Mm-hmm.
So like your whole dice set goes down to 3 dice.
Yep.
Which means you can get fancier dice.
Mm-hmm.
Get fancies you want for those 3 dice because you don't need to like the plethora. So yeah, go back to the thing we already mentioned, the base damage. This is, like I said, multiple people at the table came up on it because yes, when you take damage, it's basically saying like there's no way defaultly that you're not going to take damage. There's no chance that the person might miss. That feels a little weird. Also, like the trade-off is like, oh, I did base damage to the thing versus I did nothing. And it still may feel like I did nothing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that mechanic, I don't know if it needs to be changed. It may just be that's the flavor of.
I think so, because I've noticed. So for a lot of the abilities that I had, base damage was pretty significant still. The only time base damage was really like, oh, that's not much of anything, is when the ability had a second effect.
Gotcha.
So I had one that I used it twice. I did 2 damage both times, but it allowed me to pull a target towards the target I attacked, which was great because the target I attacked was on a gangplank and the other guy was on the boat. So I basically just pulled the guy into the water twice. Yeah. So that was fun. Like, yeah, I only did 2 damage, but I eliminated 2 people.
Yeah. One of the things that we came up with though at the table was the concept of maybe the base damage should be turned into a fail unless like a bargain to get base damage.
Yeah.
It was like that thing was maybe the mechanic should be like, well, base damage is like I could spend a resource to do this.
Right.
But that really only helps on the player side.
Right.
Maybe not.
And as soon as the DM starts doing it, then the players start going, no.
Yeah, it's
not fair.
You're being mean. So the other thing was like the choice of being dead on the ground.
Yeah.
Like that thing is like, the question is basically, is that going to lead to more cinematic moments, or is that going to be more of just a thing that ends up people just making bad choices and killing their character?
Yeah, because we made bad choices.
Yeah, and there's like because there's parts of that are like really cool and evocative, like in D&D, if a monster downs you, like there's nothing you can do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless you have some mechanic that pops you up, you have no agency. Having agency is great,
right?
But the question. Maybe the fact that like you can keep chewing that health away,
mm-hmm.
like versus the thing of like, oh, you could do something, but you're just going to take a wound, and there's like a very small chance that you would die.
Well, I kind of feel like there should be I feel like there should be an incapacitated state, kind of like what D&D has, where you're not dead, you're just incapacitated. And I also feel like once you go into negative, like you can still do that thing where you're rolling the dice to see if whatever. But once you've hit negative, you start taking negatives to your attacks and things like that. Unless you're a class that's designed to be like that, you know. But for the most part, it's just like, yeah, I can choose to do something. I might pay for it. It won't kill me unless we have a TPK or something like that, but I'm not going to be very good at it, you know, just because I have blood in my eyes or a broken leg or something like that. Because I feel like there's no unconscious, you know, like it's just like I'm awake, I'm dead, you know, like I don't know, that's just how I feel.
Yeah, it's a little weird to get used to, and there's also the question of just like if you go up and if your stamina scales. Does it get to this place where it's like you're like
you have twice as many hit points.
Like I went down, so I'm going to do a couple actions before this even becomes an issue. There's a lot of questions on how that.
Yeah, how is damage going to scale leveling up too? Because again, you know, in D&D, your damage tends to go up as your spell levels go up or as your equipment gets better, or yada yada. For the elementalist, it's just 3 tiers of damage. Like we don't see that. We don't have the rest of the playtest in front of us.
And for the game too is supposed to be a lot more condensed in level progression. And you could easily see like if you had the level progression of D&D with a character this complex at level 1, like the character would be unplayable.
Crazy.
So like we have to assume that at some point like you're not gaining a whole new systems. You're just basically padding what you have.
You're just modifying it slightly. Yeah.
So like I think bounded scale is probably something that they did, but is an interesting thing to look at too. Let's see, the only things do we think of that were negative. And basically our player Drake just essentially didn't like dying.
I mean, it wasn't his fault. He kind of got surrounded right at the beginning. We didn't quite understand the repercussions of what we were doing immediately until he was nearly dead already.
Yeah, that was lovely. So I think the idea of having these, I think the idea of having this thorough of a defined class is very much something that may hold back on replayability.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think you're going to run into that quickly. But and the thing is, I don't think this game will ever replace D&D.
No,
this is not like your default fantasy game that you're going to go to. But like this is going to be heroic high fantasy, and there's probably like you get the options. You play tactician. I'm sure I've heard them say like, oh, you can do a tactician with this kit and that kit and these different things. But you're probably going to have like your favorite way to do it.
Yeah,
and you're going to play your tactician character, and then at some point you're going to be like, I think I'm going to move on to a different class and probably not go back and play a tactician.
Right.
That's a little bit different in systems where, you know, like arguably D&D where classes are very thematic, but like you just have a lot of different choices, subclasses. Yeah. And maybe not. Maybe this is all just bull BS in my head. But like it feels that way. Like I could imagine myself playing a warrior, like a fighter in D&D like 3 different times in 3 different ways. The way the tactician class, I think because it's so robust, I feel like I wouldn't want to go back to it.
Yeah.
Like I would want to do it once, and I'm very excited about doing it once. But then maybe like when I did it that one time, I'm like, yeah, good. That's my experience is that.
Yeah.
And that feels a lot more like, I'm thinking of like MMOs. Like an MMO, generally, you could make a character, and then spec it in a direction and but like generally you have your hunter, you have your...
You want the meta build.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think that's one of the downsides that comes with a very flavorful experience is that you're like, got it, happy, done.
And I mean, these are pre-gen characters as well, so we really haven't seen the character creation, so we haven't really seen
it's in the
other options.
Just for the record,
I know, but we did. I have not seen it.
Yeah, so that is technically not part of this review. So. Yeah. Yeah. Well, but it's good. Maybe it's good that we don't have this much system to say. I think we have opinions. We had a lot of opinions on mechanics the day we played.
Yes.
Because we were talking about things, and a lot of that I think maybe after a couple of days has faded, and just the good feelings about the game are left. So that's probably a good idea. That's probably a good thing.
Just means we have to play it again.
So what do you think? So you think If you had to sit down and either play or run, and your choice was between D&D and this for fantasy.
Again, I'm burned out on D&D.
Yeah.
So I would much rather play this right now. Play a campaign for 2 or 3 months. I'll see how I feel at that point. But it's like we've played a D&D campaign for like a year and a half, and I'm over it.
And we've played 6, 7, maybe 8 D&D campaigns in the past 10 years.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of that. So yeah, fantasy is not something I think we're super ready to go back into that often, unless it is
something new,
very flavorful fantasy.
Yes.
I still want to look at Blades in the Dark and the Dragarian novels.
Yeah.
That.
But I will say, I mean, you can even attest to this. While we were playing, there were several times where I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Oh wow, I can do this. Like that doesn't happen in D&D for me that much, because I was like, I generally know what everybody's capable of.
Yeah. I think it captures some stuff that was there when we started playing. You know, actually, I think a lot of us, we kind of experienced a little bit through the video game.
Yeah.
It was there when you were like, oh my gosh, I just yelled at that guy and he lost hit points and died. So I think there's a lot of that spirit in this, and maybe that's why kind of. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think we're rambling at this point.
Yeah.
So from us, you know, have your own opinions, but you know, go look it up.
Yeah, play it.
Watch the videos. There's plenty of videos where you can watch Matt and you can watch his buddy who helps him design all this stuff, talk about all their decisions. If it sounds cool, get interested in it. And if you want to go do your little, you know, Battle of Helm's Deep kind of stuff.
Yeah.
This is probably what you could probably do with it.
And I can say, looking at the character sheets and everything, it looks a little complicated at first, but it really quickly boils down to, I have 5 or 6 abilities. They all essentially are activated the same way. I just decide when and how to use them. And then the game just kind of opens up to you with all the options that are in front of you.
Yeah. I mean, not knowing the game at all, 4 people, for our experience, sat around and learned it over the course of a couple hours.
Mm-hmm.
And every 30 minutes we were like, oh, okay, now I understand that.
And this makes sense why it's like this.
And by the time we were done, we were like, we get this. Now we're ready to make characters.
Mm-hmm. But we were dead by then because we had already made all the poor decisions.
Poor decisions do not help heroic fantasy, I guess. All right. Well, with that glowing endorsement, we will leave you guys for this little bonus trip that turned out longer than I thought. So.
Oh, wow.
So you know what? Draw Steel.
Bonus.
Bonus Draw Steel. Go have fun.
Yeah. Goodbye.